All right, so we're talking about the causes of the Great Depression. All right, so first, overproduction and underconsumption. Things like the assembly line made production quicker and more efficient. So, if you look at Henry Ford's Model T car, first, it took longer to produce, so the price was higher and there was less supply. But after the assembly line, after the utilization of that method for efficiency, you're going to get cars produced much quicker and much more of them. So supply goes up, and we are overproducing products because of efficiency to the point of where there's more than what people even need. So the demand is low, there's underconsumption. If people are not buying a product, the factory owner is going to start to fire workers because he doesn't need so many workers. So you get a lot of people out of work as a result, and then that feeds into even less consumption. So it's kind of a circular thing. You're producing too much, people don't need that much, less people buy it. You need less workers then in the factories to produce this product. So layoffs happen, people get fired, and then consumption goes even further down because people don't have enough money to continue consuming these products. The 1920s were not a great time at all for farmers. World War I was. There was a huge need for food to go across the sea to the Allied powers, for people at home, for our soldiers when we went over there. So World War I was a good time for farmers here in the United States. But right after, there's a decline in the demand. And farmers got so good at producing their products that led to overproduction. So now we have more crops than there's demand. Prices go down. So farmers have to foreclose on their farms. They can't pay off the mortgages. A lot of people, they lose their land. And there's increasing use of credit. So, you guys probably have credit cards, and you can, if you're not looking at your statements, it gets easy to overspend more than you actually have. So, and then if you lose your job, how are you paying back this credit? So Americans during the 1920s, they spent big. Remember, World War I was a time where they tried to conserve, they tried to not spend, they tried to not be wasteful. So what happened in the 1920s? The complete opposite. People let go. They tried to enjoy life, spend. The lifestyle of spending occurred, and so credit went up. More people were using credit to buy things and went into debt. People felt the depression differently depending on what bracket you were of wealth, and wealth was really unevenly distributed in the 1920s because of a rising industrial age, because of factories becoming more efficient, and because wages only went up a little bit. Factory production and just production in general led to increases in profits by so much as like 40% for businesses, but wages only went up about 11% on average. So the wages didn't match the profits, and the wealthiest people were pocketing so much extra money than they needed. And you could see in the pie chart there that the people that had more than $10,000, making $10,000 or more a year, only 1% of the population is in that category. But people that are making less than $2,000 a year, that's the majority, 65% of people. So that wealth disparity also played a role in creating the depression. So based on what you've heard so far, what is one cause of the Great Depression? So there are more. This is a lot of people, they think about the Great Depression and they think the stock market crash of 1929. That's what caused it, but it wasn't. That was like the last straw. But all these other conditions built up to it. So speaking of the stock market over speculation and buying on margin were a major cause. During the 1920s, people stopped treating the stock market with the respect it should have, where if you're investing on something, you should be investing because you believe in the product. You want to invest long term because you believe in that product and you want to make a better product and you want to back up that company. but it became a game to try to make the most money you could. You weren't investing for the long term. You were investing for just as long as you could ride the wave as a company did better and better, and then you'd pull your money out and you'd sell when you thought they were at the peak. So that kind of game-like treatment of the market is going to cause problems. You also have people investing in the market without the money to do so. So people would buy on margin, and sometimes it was just a minimal amount of margin they'd buy on, but sometimes people really pushed it to where they only put down 10% on a stock to purchase that security. So they owed 90%, but the stock brokers at the time they didn't have to have licenses, there was no regulation on the stock market, so they were okay with doing these shady kind of things. And what would happen is the company would fail, and the person not only owed the 10% that they put down, actually that was taken from them, but they also owed the 90% that they were hoping to earn in the stock market. So they didn't even have that 90% to begin with. They bought on margin. So they're in trouble. They lost their money, and now they owe the money that they should have had in the first place when they bought the stock. So it created a kind of a bubble in the stock market that didn't really exist. It made people think that the stocks were doing better than they were, and that the market was booming when it was a bubble that was ready to burst, and does in 1929. So you can see, the stock market just getting more and more popular as more people invested in it. But a reckoning comes. So on October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday, we get an inkling of the fact that the market is going to crash. In the summer, there were hints of it too. People were starting to see that this bubble existed. But on Thursday, October 24th of 1929, you get the first major selling on the market, where the market just drops. Some bankers and investors thought, hey, we could reestablish confidence in the market by buying up a bunch more stock. So some wealthy people did try to save the market by buying a bunch of stocks that were being sold. And it sort of did create a pseudo confidence for the weekend. On Friday, the market rebounded a bit. But then on Black Tuesday, October 29th, 1929, all confidence is drained. People are selling everything they've got. They can't find someone to sell it to. You can't sell a stock unless someone wants to buy it off of you. So people couldn't even find someone to sell at this point. Stocks are crashing. The whole market crashes. People start going to their banks to try to get their savings. But the banks don't have the money on them to give everybody their savings. The banks don't do that. Banks take your money and they invest it. And at the time, banks were doing crooked things that FDR, when he becomes president, he's going to stop. Banks were, even private banks that you and me would put our money in, they were taking our money and investing it in the stock market in risky ways. That's against the law now, to where you have two different types of banks. You've got the investment banks, and then you have the private depositors like you and me banks. And so everyone's going to the banks asking for their money. Banks don't have that money on hand. They can't produce it, so they're failing. The banks close. A lot of banks close, and you hear that your friend or relative's bank just went under and they lost everything because there was no insurance on banks at the time. So you lost everything, and you feared for your own money, so you went to your bank, and it was like a domino effect where every bank just starts being challenged, and you get thousands of banks failing and closing and people losing their money. There was no backup. You lost your money. So we said overproduction caused underconsumption. We saw that the market crashed. We saw people lost their savings. So nobody's buying new products. companies are going out of business and unemployment goes through the roof. From 1929 to 1932, unemployment grew to 12 million people. At some points throughout the Depression, you get up to even 40% of non-farmers being unemployed in certain cities. So now that we covered a few more things, what is an additional cause of the Great Depression that you didn't mention last time? While you're doing that, I will introduce another. You can see it's not just the crash that caused it, it's a string of events and causes. So during this time, President Hoover thinks it would be smart to try to help farmers out help business out by raising tariffs. So Congress puts through a raised tariff. Hoover signs it. You have now higher tariffs, like the Hawley-Smoot tariff that raises tariff rates 31% to sometimes in the 40% on goods being imported from Britain, Europe in general, other countries. And what happens when we do that is that you guys know at this point what a tariff is, right? Tariffs, taxes on goods incoming from other countries. So if you want to buy like a British product, you'd have to pay more here in America. If a tariff, say like the Hawley-Smoot tariff in June 1930 that passed, if you want to buy a certain product, you'd have to pay that tariff. If you're a business, and you want to sell that item, you have to pay that high tariff coming in from the other country. So what happens is other countries start to resent us for that, and they pass their own tariffs on U.S. goods. So in Britain, it would be more expensive to buy an American product because of these like reciprocal tariffs that they passed against us. So now when we should all be banding together as a world market, we are now all at each other's throats trying to out-tariff each other. And the general idea of a tariff is it's supposed to help your domestic businesses, like at home. It's supposed to make people want to buy American. If it's a tariff on outside products from other countries, it would make you want to buy American. But it just generally ends up driving prices up when people don't have money to buy anything in the first place. So it backfires, and then it also hurts the rest of the world because these reciprocal tariffs that happen. People are struggling to the point where they've lost their home and they don't have a job and they can't afford their next meal. Soup kitchens and bread lines open up. And the irony of this photo here is that these people are waiting in line in a bread line when right in the back there's this billboard saying there's no way like the American way, and you have this family that's just living the American dream, right? So people are losing their homes. They're gathering together scraps at the scrapyard to just make a makeshift tent somewhere for their family to stay. And sometimes you get these towns, these like on a clearing, people would set up all these tents in a row, and it looked like a little mini city. It was a shanty town of scrap-made tents and living quarters, and they would call those Hoovervilles out of resentment for President Hoover for not doing anything to help them. In the Midwest, Great Plains area, places like Oklahoma, you have the Dust Bowl happening to them, which is a severe drought comes through this area that was already dry to begin with, that farmers were already using, tactics to try to use this land. It gets so dry that dirt's being kicked up into the wind, and you have these black blizzards that would come rolling through like a storm. It was a health and safety issue, and it also ruined farms and crops, and people just got out of there. They wanted to leave. Many did. Many left Oklahoma and the Great Plains to try to start new in the West, mostly going to places like California. The book Grapes of Wrath by John Steinbeck, written in 1939, is a story of an Oklahoma family trying to start again in California. So Hoover is he was considered to be just this efficient, very forward-thinking man, and he was this problem solver. But he really stuck to the idea of rugged individualism will get us out of this depression. It's going to take hard work, sticking to trying to get a job. And in his quote here, he basically says, it's going to be the producers and the consumers that get us out of this, not the government. And that was the opposite approach at the time to really take. And so he starts going more towards that relief end. So he starts cutting relief checks to unemployed people. He creates the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, which it was trying to give loans to businesses because they wanted to save the businesses. If you could save the business and it stays open, it could hire workers. The workers then have wages that they could buy stuff with, and it fixes the economy. So that was his goal. It just didn't work. Businesses were struggling. They weren't funneling that extra money into workers on a large scale to where it would have fixed the economy. So he tries other things that FDR will do eventually. FDR becomes a spender. He deficit spends to try to get people jobs. So Hoover thinks about that idea even before FDR, and he tries to do the Hoover Dam as a spending excursion to try to get people employed. So in Nevada, they start building this Hoover Dam, and it does employ many people, but it's only temporary, and it doesn't do enough. Not enough people are employed to fix a national economy. So people look at it as Hoover was a failed president in many ways. He didn't approach this depression the way it needed to be. So people were resentful. You get these terms like Hoover hotels and Hoovervilles for these shanty towns and scrap makeshift homes, and Hoover blankets, newspapers. So you get a lot of negativity towards the president. I mean, that was already bad enough, but this is kind of the icing on the cake for him. The Bonus Expeditionary Army, Bonus Army for short, it's all these veterans that were in World War I that were owed bonuses. And it was the bonuses were supposed to be paid in 1945, but they wanted them now because they were struggling now and needed to put food on their family's table now. So they marched to Washington. Congress at first entertained the idea of passing a bill that would pay them now, and the bill doesn't pass. So the Bonus Army, a lot of them leave, but some stay. And Hoover gives the okay to General Douglas MacArthur to use force to shove them out. 4 die, 1,000 are injured. It looks terrible. They're using tear gas. They've got bayonets on their guns as intimidation. They're forcefully pushing out veterans, soldiers in World War I. It looks terrible, and it just kills his opportunity of getting reelected. So in 1932, Franklin Roosevelt runs on a New Deal idea. Roosevelt for a New Deal, and he just dominates the election. So you can see there the election 1932 landslide for FDR. So tomorrow we talk about FDR in the New Deal. And if you have questions, stick around. If not, I'll see you guys later. Have a great one.